Hello, my name is Fredrik Alvén and I will guide you through this demonstration of how to assess historical thinking in the classroom. This short video will switch between slides from this PowerPoint presentation and a discussion with the teacher, and in the end the most important points will be summarized as well. I hope you enjoy and find the video usable. A new way of looking at history education, and with the starting point in historical thinking, also means new understandings of assessments. Therefore, you can talk about new directions in assessment. To make the main points in the new directions of this assessment manageable, 4 questions frames these presentations, and these questions are: what kind of knowledge are the students supposed to develop? How can students show this knowledge? How can teachers make valid assessments? How can assessment help students to develop their knowledge? It is our belief that if you answer and work from these questions as you assess your students, your assessment also will become a strong tool to develop your students' historical thinking. Now each question will be outlined and also further explained by a discussion with the teacher. So, the first question is, what kind of knowledge are the students supposed to develop? There is no singular definition of historical thinking that is universally accepted today, but there is a consensus that it comprises cognitive process used by historians. So in other words, we have to help the students to think like historians. To do this, we can start with the usual second-order concepts. Second-order concepts as significance, continuity and change, causes and consequences, historical empathy, and evidence. There are of course more, but these are very common. Each second-order concept contains several aspects when the past is interpreted and understood as history. There are different tools that help you to understand and reason about, for example, significance in history. These different aspects for each second-order concept are the ones that the students are supposed to manage when they think historical. So let's now see how a teacher can think about knowledge connected to second-order concept as causes and its different aspects. Hello, my name is Fredrik Alvén. I work as an associate professor at the Malmö University, and today I'm going to meet Senait Bolin, teacher in history, and ask her how she works with assessment in the history classroom. Please join me. Hello, so nice of you to let us to be here today and to take part of how you plan and assess students in history teaching. But could you start with telling us who you are and what you do?
Yes, my name is Senait and I have been working as a lower secondary teacher in history, social science, religion and geography for many years. So today I will plan and show how to teach and assess the students' knowledge about the French Revolution.
So where do you start when you plan a theme like the French Revolution?
Okay, so I always start with the learning outcome. I ask myself, what are the students supposed to know or be able to do after my teaching? So if I don't define that, it is hard to know how and what to assess. All historical events have a context that the students must identify, and they can do this by asking questions like what, when, where, who and why. And this context is easy to memorize and repeat for the students, and it's also easy for me as a teacher to assess it. Factual knowledge is easy to assess. It is more challenging to assess historical thinking.
Challenging, you say? Okay, in what way?
Well, first you have to decide what is historical thinking. It is a cognitive operation. And the question is, how do we make it visible for the students?
Make it visible, you say. But can we do that?
Yes, I think we can. But I think it demands a lot of historical subject knowledge. It is not enough to know that different causes are important. You have to know how different causes can be used and how they can build a historical reason.
Can you give an example of this?
Okay, last time I assessed how my students reason about causes in history was when I taught how Columbus ended up in America. And then I recognized that they just made a list of causes. The students have no problem coming up with lists of causes for a historical event. For example, common causes to why Christopher Columbus ended up in America. And here you can see some example of such causes. The merchants in Europe wanted to find a faster way to India and China to take control over the trade. The Portuguese king and queen wanted to go west to find this faster route. Or the purpose in the end was to make more money out of the profitable trade. So these are good causes, but I also want the pupils, the students, to use the causes to make a historical reasoning.
Okay, I see. And now to come beyond this, just a list of causes. What do you want them to develop this time? What kind of knowledge do you want them to understand this time?
Well, this time I want them to understand different aspects of historical reasoning. Okay, so this is a cognitive model that I want to use to develop the students' historical thinking. I want them to use different aspects of history to reason about different causes, the underlying causes, triggering causes, and structures and actors as causes.
When the certain knowledge the students are supposed to learn is defined, they must of course be taught about this. If teachers want students to achieve the ambitious historical thinking goals, both their teaching and their examinations or working tasks must give the students opportunities to first learn historical thinking and then first after that to show their knowledge of how to use them. A valid measure of historical thinking must have the students to engage in the historical thinking processes the test is designed to measure. The historical thinking concepts are in their perfection very complex, why it is good to assess them in a progression. In a simple form, the students can start to identify different aspects of historical thinking by, for example, multiple choice questions. This can be used, for example, by multiple choice questions where the students are supposed to identify a triggering cause of a historical event. If the students are more used to work with historical thinking, they can be assessed by constructed responses. One way is to help them to reason by scaffolding. The easiest way of doing this is to give them a frame for their reasonings. If the students are really used to reason about causes in history, they do not need the scaffolding and can write an essay without models from, for example, the prompt "Reason about the causes of the French Revolution." Now, let's see how a teacher can reason before constructing a test to measure how the student can reason about causes of the French Revolution. So, now you know what you want the students to be able to do, but how can you make them do this?
Well, first of all, you have to let them train or practice this ability to reason about causes and to model what you want them to learn.
I think this is a really important point you make out here, because it's very complex operations we want the students to be able to do.
Yes, very much so. The students will not learn to think historically without training, so they need help. And I will therefore scaffold them to help them reason. So they will have a frame for their reasoning at the test, something like this. So the exam task I will give my students is reason about the causes of the French Revolution. And to help them, to give them this frame, I will give them some underlying pointers that they can use to develop their reason about the causes. So So the underlying pointers are: describe the historical context. Where are we in time and space? Give a background to what will happen. Reason about underlying structural causes. And last, explain the outbreak of the revolution from triggering causes and important actors.
If a teacher assesses aspects that are not supposed to be assessed, the evaluation contains so-called construct irrelevant variance. This is not good, and two things can counteract this. The first is to carefully plan and stage phase 1 and 2, that is, what to assess and how to make this possible. In the third phase, the assessment aspects can help the teacher to make actual valid assessments. Assessment aspects oblige the teacher to define and write down what she is supposed to focus when she assesses. This she must do relative to what she wants to assess, what she has taught, and what kind of knowledge the test taker can show in the examination. Assessment aspects are most significant in open-ended questions or essays, while the student answers in this form can vary more and the knowledge the student shows can be harder to detect. Let's see how a teacher can reason as she constructs assessment aspects. So now you sit there with all these responses from the students, but we all now know they can be rather messy to assess and to understand what they mean and so on. So how can you ensure that you can make a good assessment or a valid assessment among all these different kinds of responses from the students?
You're right. To assess open constructed responses or essays is one of the hardest tasks for a teacher. So you can never ensure a totally valid assessment. But you can make yourself aware of this problem, and you can use different tools to level up the quality of your assessment.
Tools? Do you have any suggestions about this?
I usually use what I call assessment aspects.
Assessment aspects, but are these not the same aspects as in your cognitive model?
Yes and no. History always deals with unique historical events. So this means we can never understand historical thinking concepts as generic skills. Like once you have learned them, you will be able to understand all history. So rather, they must always be used on a specific historical content.
Okay, that seems reasonable, but how do you prepare these assessment aspects and what do they look like?
I would say that the assessment aspects are the key to real alignment. So they must consider your cognitive model, the teaching and learning activities, and the test you have constructed.
That sounds challenging. Have you prepared assessment aspects for the French Revolution?
I have. So the exam task was reason about the causes of the French Revolution. And these are the assessment aspects that I have prepared. So number 1, to which extent do the student's response, answer to the historical context? And the help questions here is when, why, where, and who. And number 2, to which extent do the response answer to underlying causes? And here the students could lift up things like economic debt in France in the 1700s, enlightenment, new spiraling social classes maybe. And number 3, to which extent do the respondent answer to triggering causes, like shortage of bread and high prices, women's march to Versailles, storming of the Bastille? And number 4, to which extent do the response answer to actors?
Okay, I can see it takes a lot of knowledge to secure a valid assessment in the history classroom.
Yes, it does. So being a teacher is really fun, but also demanding work.
I can see that. Thanks a lot for having me here today.
Thank you.
Certain assessment practices can play a critical role in promoting student learning. The teacher can do formative assessment, that is. That means she used the assessment to further the student's knowledge. 3 starting questions are good to begin with. Where are you in your knowledge? Point out to the student what she has done good. Where do you want to go? Point out what would have defined a more qualified answer or knowledge. And the 3rd question, what can you do to get there? Help the student to point out what misses in the answer or how she can further her knowledge. To do formative assessment presupposes alignment in the classroom, where the ideas of what valid knowledge in history is, how to assess this, and then really assess this knowledge are crystal clear. A good metaphor of formative assessment is how to read a map. Start with, here you are. This is your destination, and this way you can go. This video shows how to assess historical thinking in the classroom. The first step is to define what certain knowledge looks like. The second step is to make the student knowledge visible. The third step is to make sure that I or the teacher can see the student's knowledge. The fourth step is to use the assessment to further develop the student's knowledge. If all this is done, we are sure the assessment will help to develop a true historical thinking in the classroom. We hope you have enjoyed the video and found it instructive. Thank you.